morning. Welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. And boy, we've got an old friend back today who will give us some perspectives on the weather. I have a perspective first. We started always. Chris, you'll recall that we always try to start with a kudo. This comes pretty personal for me, and I just noted, and I had known about it, but the Courier had an article on it this morning. Our young friend Jason Jones, former high school athlete and a magnificent young man, they're having a scholarship for Jason at the Lincoln Community High School. They have raised the necessary money for this first scholarship. I cannot think of a better way to honor a tremendous young man than with scholarships. Mm-hmm. So those who might be disposed, and I hope there are many, and I plead for many, to go to the State Bank of Lincoln and make a contribution to the Jason Jones Memorial Scholarship. You'll feel real good about that, I guarantee you. So go ahead, Mrs. Busby. Why don't you introduce our guest this morning?
Well, he's here just in the nick of time. Yeah. Really. Chris Miller is, of course, with the weather station that's out at the edge of town. And if you've never noticed it, it's pretty impressive. Chris, I don't know what's happened. There must have been a lot of sinning in the U.S. of A. because there's been a lot of badness happening weather-wise, an awful lot, and it's headed north and into the Midwest now.
And it's all your fault.
Yeah. And today we're supposed to get weather. We're not headed for tornadoes. Even this is tornado appreciation month, or whatever they call it.
Well, I don't know if I want to say we appreciate tornadoes, but it's definitely time to be ready for them. This is
maybe
our peak
tornado
season.
observation, and we should be observant.
We should be, absolutely. No, you're right. The last few weeks, as we've gotten into May here, the weather has really erupted across the Midwest. Everything from lots of hail and wind and floods and tornadoes, especially recently in Oklahoma. And last night they had quite a few tornadoes down in Kentucky. Yes. You don't often think of Kentucky as being an area that would get a lot of tornadoes, but the storms set up down there. We're expecting strong storms later this afternoon and especially this evening. Mm-hmm. Primarily anything that does develop, wind and hail, we could see a few tornadoes out of those, especially in western Illinois, west of here. But this is our peak season. This is when you look at all the tornadoes that have occurred in past history in the state of Illinois, the month of May has had the most tornadoes of any month. So this is when all those ingredients come together for us.
Are we here in this area kind of prone to have tornadoes?
We are, especially this time of the year. This is where a lot of the ingredients, like the moisture, we need a lot of moisture. And this morning it's really foggy outside. It was quite a drive up from Lincoln this morning.
Right.
But that tells us there's a lot of moisture in the air, so tornadoes need that to form. A lot of wind above the ground, which we have plenty of that this time of the year. The clouds are moving pretty quick. So when you put all those ingredients together, and then you get, like when you see on the weather map, the big L, the low pressure areas and the fronts with those, anytime those are approaching with warm air, moisture, wind above the ground that's pretty strong, you can get tornadoes. And typically here in central Illinois, all of that peaks right about this time of the year and into the first part of June. If there's anything I've noticed, I've been with the Weather Service for almost 30 years now, and if there's anything I've noticed, we've seen a trend more toward, we used to see a lot of storms in April and the first part of May, and then things would kind of quiet down as the summer approached. We're seeing more of a trend of storms developing later, more into May and especially June, last several years. The jury is still out on that as to what's causing that. There's a lot of good young students, researchers looking into that kind of thing as to what might be causing that. Right now, we're just kind of speculating on the fact that a lot of it has to do with coming out of the winter. What kind of weather do you have coming out of the winter? The state climatologist, Jim Angel, I've seen his name in the news a lot when we talk about things related to what it's the last month been like and all that kind of stuff with the weather. He has said that in past years, our winters have been, not as strong or severe as
pretty mild, really.
Pretty mild. But when we do get the winter weather, it's occurring later. It's occurring in February, not around December into January. We're getting more of the winter weather in February and into early March. I remember just a few years ago here in Lincoln, we had 15 inches of snow the last week of March, just within the last 5 or 6 years. So when you have a later winter like that, then your spring season and your warmer weather tends to get pushed off a little more, and so we're seeing a trend that way.
Probably Al Gore's fault, isn't it?
Yeah, either that or El Nino or La Nina.
One of those two, and I'll tell you, this past winter, nice mild winter. I enjoyed it because we didn't have a whole lot of snow and ice.
Yeah.
Some, but not a lot. Cold temperatures were kept to a minimum. We didn't have too much of that.
Wasn't that bad?
And anyway, that was that El Nino, and the El Nino is still hanging in there. And that's another reason why we're seeing a little bit later start to our severe weather season. El Nino tends to do that. In fact, that was one of the strongest ones we've ever had. I think it was the second strongest on record. Only 1997-98 was stronger. So next year, though, oftentimes what happens after these big El Ninos, we get a complete reversal. And we go to La Nina, which for La Nina for us basically means it's going to be winter. Cold, snowy, ice.
You will notice it.
You're going
to notice it. You're going to say, "Oh, I wish we had last winter back."
Yeah, right.
Move to Minnesota.
Yeah, right.
Now, does global warming have anything to do with El Nino or La Nina?
Not very much.
She speaks Spanish very well, by the
yes,
way.
she does, doesn't she? Wow, that's great.
2 years in high school.
Well, you remember it. That's
well,
great.
I do remember a little bit, enough so that I translated for a busload in Mexico one time. Not very well. They were
She
all
is
lost
impressive,
too.
isn't she?
Wow.
I knew she was smarter than the average bear.
But no, the climate change that we're seeing up in the Arctic areas, that doesn't have a whole lot to do with El Nino, La Nina. The reason we've heard a lot about it lately is because meteorologists have studied it more the last several years. Even when I started with the Weather Service, almost 30 years ago, El Nino was kind of, people are just kind of talking about it.
Really?
The researchers were just getting into it. So it's a relatively, but it's been around for hundreds of years. It's been noticed. It was noticed by sailors and fishermen off the coast of South America back in the 1500s, 1600s. They have evidence that it was occurring then. So,
two among others, two things I don't understand are the Democratic Party's superdelegates and global warming.
And are they synonymous?
Is that El Nino?
Well, there's some question there. When we talk about what's going on with the changing climate, a lot of people will say, we like to say weather is local.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, where you live, you look out the window, you're at home and you see the weather and you say, I haven't really noticed too much changing in my lifetime, in my backyard, or if you've lived in various places around the Midwest, I haven't noticed very many things changing. What's up with this climate change thing? And here, where we live in the mid-latitudes of the globe, we really haven't seen all that much. If anything, the only thing we have seen change through the years is this trend toward heavier rain. We're seeing more flooding.
Yeah,
we're seeing very heavy rainfall. I don't remember, and we even look back at records. When do you see, where these deluges of 7, 12, 15 inches of rain in one day? That just didn't happen back in the very rarely happened back in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and so on, even farther back than that if we have records in some places. But where we are seeing clearly change, is way north of here, up in the Arctic area, around the pole, the North Pole, the ice cap up there. Every year it seems to be the ice sheets are melting more and more. In fact, some of the climate experts are suggesting that this summer the Arctic Ocean, there might be a passage that goes from the Atlantic across the Arctic to the Pacific, that parts of it may completely melt because it's at a minimum. And usually it hits a minimum in August, September time frame, and they're seeing that. And people who live in Alaska and native peoples in the northern part of Canada, they are definitely noticing how it's affecting their weather, the wildlife,
their whole lifestyle.
Their lifestyle. But down here, the effects have really not been felt very greatly. So that's why sometimes people will go, they kind of thumb their nose at it and say, well, this is a political issue, which it has become, unfortunately. Yeah. But when you look at what's actually going on, there are parts of the world. It's just, that's why I don't like the term global warming. Some people say, well, it's just semantics. But global warming kind of implies that the whole globe is warming.
Well, yeah.
And it's not. It really isn't. In fact, there's parts of the United States that in the last 100+ years have actually cooled a few degrees.
Is this all cyclical, though?
Yes, definitely. Our planet. Yep.
Yeah,
that's a good question. No, it is. It's definitely cyclical. There are shorter cycles that there's some really good evidence that you can tie it to the sunspots and activities of the sun, because the sun affects our climate significantly. But on longer cycles, much longer cycles, yeah, you can definitely trace some cycles. The Earth has gone through this before. It's going to go through it again. We just happen to be living in a time right now where we're warmer. And we've adapted to that, but there are going to be times, much longer than any of us will ever be here to witness, where we'll probably go back to ice again in this area. So it's just the way the planet
I'm not
works.
ready for that.
Oh, no, I'm not either.
I don't think it's going to be an issue for any of us. Even Jim is going to miss it.
It's interesting to know how the weather affects the economy. Because agriculture is so terribly important, particularly here.
Yes.
So you and your management of the weather out there have a direct impact on the rural economy here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, you hit on a very good point, Bill, because that's the reason why the National Weather Service is part of the United States Department of Commerce. Because of the impact of weather on the economy.
Sure.
Agriculture, huge impact. Because when you're talking about large fields, there's not a lot that can be done per se. I mean, more so these days than in the past. Let's say if we could say, look, there's going to be a drought, or there's going to be this or that, then the whatever variety of seed is used can be planted to help in that situation. But yeah, it does play a huge role in commodity prices. And in fact, I check every week. I check the crop reports because I get asked questions all the time about when is the weather going to change? When are we going to get it? It's good to see that. Last I saw earlier this week, the report showed generally in this area we're ahead of schedule on the corn. We've got a lot of the corn in. Some of it's already emerging, and so that's looking pretty good. Starting to get a little behind on the beans though, because it's been wet. We've had so much rain rain lately, and it's just, I think there were, out of the 7 days last week, there were only something like 2 or 3 days that were suitable for field work. And I talked to a guy yesterday down in southeast Illinois, down around Newton, Effingham area. They've had a lot more rain than what we've had.
They have.
And yeah, in fact, they have such a surplus of soil moisture, they haven't been able to get in the fields. They're behind on corn. They haven't even started beans in many areas. So they're having a problem down there. And he said, please shut off the rain. I can't get in the fields.
Yeah.
You know,
well, what's with all this copious amounts of rain everywhere and the flooding?
Yeah, that you know, there are a lot of speculation as to what might be the cause of that. In the longer term, we've seen some studies come out of the universities that have suggested that some of that has to do with the urban sprawl and development of businesses and stuff like that. And you might think, well, what would that have to do with rain? Well, when you get heat that builds up over a city, in fact, there was pretty much a landmark study that was done a few years ago that showed that downstream from St. Louis, so we're talking western, southwest Illinois, they've had more rain and more flooding down in there than back before when St. Louis was a much smaller city.
That's interesting.
So we don't see a whole, I mean, Chicago, we see some of that. You know, obviously Chicago's huge, but you've got Lake Michigan sitting right there, so who's noticing how much rain is falling into the lake because of Chicago? But that's part of it. The other part, and I was talking to Jim earlier when I first arrived about the wildfires. We've had a lot of wildfires.
Yes.
Canada, huge wildfire going on right now. Look what's happened the last few years out in the Rockies, the huge drought in the western U.S. Wildfires, California, Nevada, the Rocky Mountain areas. The smoke from those wildfires, and we've seen it on satellite images, has been coming into our area here. And when you get the smoke, you might think, well, what does smoke have to do with rainfall? But the little smoke particles, raindrops can form on those much quicker and bigger, and you get heavier rain, you get flooding rains, you can also get hail. We've noticed huge amounts of hail, and I'm not talking like, we have had instances of big hail, but we had reports in parts of Illinois the last couple of weeks of just the small pea-size hail, maybe, you know, half-inch hail piling up so much that they had to get the snowplows out to push the hail out of the way. And Paris, Illinois, about 10 days ago had a hailstorm, damaged homes, damaged roofs, siding was all torn up, hail the size of baseballs, and piling up that they had to push.
And that was localized, though, in that area.
It was localized, but the storms that developed fed off of some of the smoke particles from the fires.
Well, so, if those particles can force these sorts of reactions, what about the particles from the smog and pollution?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what some of these studies are showing, is that when you get smoke from industrial areas, from cities, that can cause an increase in rainfall. Not in that city, but farther down from that area to the east or northeast. So yeah, definitely something that we keep an eye on. But
you know, this country strives to do better in not polluting so badly. But you've got countries, Japan, where they have to wear a mask, like a surgical mask, to go outdoors, for crying out loud. You know, what are you going to do about them? You can't make them do anything.
They don't have any millers over there to control that.
Yeah. And don't you leave either.
No, I have no plans of leaving. But yeah, that does play a huge role, and that's why when you get these scientists that get together globally to talk about some of these issues, you know, sometimes it turns into a finger pointing exercise where you're saying, you know, look, we're doing our part. We're trying to do our part. All the other countries are trying to do their part. Now it's up to you guys, because what a lot of people don't realize is the impact that does have on everybody around the world.
We're going to do our part right now, and our part is to honor our sponsors. So we'll take a quick commercial break, and then we'll come right back, and we'll have Mr. Chris Miller with us. And having paid homage to our much appreciated sponsors, right back here live in the studio, WLCN, high up here in the hills, I say, on Lazy Row. Our guest this morning, Mr. Chris Miller, who's a cornucopia of knowledge about weather and how it affects us. And he's always very gracious to come up here a couple of times a year to talk about weather. We appreciate your sharing your time with us, Chris.
Well, it's my pleasure. I love coming up here talking to you.
Well,
do you really?
I really do.
And
is it because we aren't mean and nasty?
Well, you know, when you're in the weather business, anytime they invite you back, that's always a good.
Well, it's fun for me because I just said this young lady on my right's a cornucopia of knowledge here, and so I can just sit back, relax, and let her carry the show. I've put in a request for a little raise for her, but we'll see. We were talking about the tornadoes as we came on air this morning. With today's magnificent increases in photography and science and all, we see tornadoes as we've never seen them before.
Yes.
Up close and safe.
Well. So,
you know, it's just amazing how some of these fellows get so close to these tornadoes to get the pictures they do. I often wonder if they're sane.
You know, I'll tell you, I just saw a video a couple days ago from a tornado in Oklahoma that my wife showed me, and it was just, I couldn't believe how close these people were getting to this. It is extremely dangerous, and I will say that a lot of the people that do this don't take chances like that. I know a lot of storm chasers and spotters who spot from from their home or some safe location that do an amazing job, and the reason they do it is because they have an interest in it, but they also want to help us and help the public. But the ones, there are some that just it's like an adrenaline rush. They want to get so close, and they take pictures and videos, and we've learned a lot. We've learned so much about tornadoes from pictures and videos like that, but we don't want anyone to take risks or take chances. But I'll tell you though, the one that you bring, a very good point about the pictures and the videos of tornadoes. Two things I want to mention. First of all, we follow in our office here in Lincoln, we follow social media, the Twitter and Facebook feeds and things like that. So in the last couple of years, we've seen people send us pictures of tornadoes and videos of tornadoes as they're happening. We've never had that before. So that really helps us do our job to determine, where exactly is that storm and what is it doing. The other thing, though, is that we've seen the numbers of tornadoes increasing through the years as cell phone technology has increased through the years. And I mentioned that to a group one time. I was giving a talk and I said, here's the reason we're seeing more tornadoes. And I pulled out my cell phone and I said, this is why. And a lady raised her hand and she said, cell phones are causing tornadoes? Is it from the cell towers? And I said, no, it's because everybody has a camera in their pocket now, or in their purse, or in their vehicle. And when they see something, they take a picture of it. And then we see it, and we're getting it. And years ago, if a tornado, and most tornadoes here in central Illinois don't stay on the ground very long. The ones that are on the ground for 10, 15, 30 minutes, those are fairly rare. Most of them touch down, they're on the ground for a minute or two, and then they're gone. If you didn't have a camera to get a picture of it, or who are you going to call? Who are you going to notify that occurred? Well, there's so many people from different angles now in different areas taking pictures of the same tornado that's been on the ground for 30 seconds. And then we're going, okay, that was a tornado, and it gets reported, it gets put into the official record. So we're seeing a lot of the weaker tornadoes numbers are increasing over the last 10, 15 years because of that.
Now we have here locally weather spotters that report into your office, people, and then also people who have little weather stations where they take rainfall in their places and so forth. Now, does that still go on?
Oh, definitely. In fact, we're seeing more and more people all the time, and we can use more and more people all the time. The weather spotters, a really dedicated group of volunteers that report. Some report directly to us. Some report to our friends over at the EMA office, Dan Fulcher and Terry Storer's office over there at the Logan County EMA. They have quite a large group of volunteers that help them out. We have people that are very active with ham radio that are also storm spotters. We call that Skywarn. And they play a big role as well, reporting to us using ham radio. But we also have have volunteers that have a rain gauge in their backyard, maybe a temperature sensor. More and more people are now getting these, where they can measure the wind, and we have ways to get that information as well, and they share that with us. So that is really, really critical information to learn more about these storms and to warn people, because it's in Lincoln alone, right in the city. I'll just use Lincoln as an example. We have, at one point, we had 10 or 12 people in Lincoln all reporting rainfall. And you might think, well, okay, it's Lincoln. Why do we need 12 people reporting rainfall in Lincoln? Well, you'd be surprised when a storm comes through, somebody on the west side of town might have a ½ inch of rain, and somebody on the east side of town could have 2 inches of rain. And we've seen that happen. So just having one rain gauge at our office out by the airport there doesn't
cover the area.
No, it doesn't describe what's happening in the whole area.
Right.
So the more people we have, the denser the network of rain gauges, it really helps.
I think that you should lobby the male portion of society, because it seems that there's some genetic defect, so that when there is a bad storm, they send the family and the family dog to the basement, and they stand on the porch and watch it. And I don't know what their problem is.
Well, I have to tell you, most of the videos that we get, and again, we don't encourage this at all, people just do this on their own, but the videos that we see from people, you've described it, Judy. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I can't tell you how many videos I have of guys recording the tornado ripping through the neighborhood, and their wife is yelling at him, "Get in the basement!" And you've got Dad going, "Get the kids down there!" And he's standing there. We had a few videos like that, a handful actually, from the Washington tornado that occurred 2.5 years ago. Unfortunately, there were quite a few guys doing that had some pretty serious injuries because the tornado moved so fast, and there was stuff flying through the air at 190 miles per hour. It's going to hurt you. So yeah, if you can see the tornado. We know what tornadoes look like. Stop recording the video. Just your safety has to come first.
648-5510. Judith, you and I keep getting remiss about letting that number be known more often. There might be some people out there that have some comments or questions for Mr. Miller. 648-5510. You mentioned standing out on the porch and so forth, and before we went on there, you and I were talking about in the old days. Nobody likes to talk about the old days. But anyway, most farmsteads, or many farmsteads at least, had what we call root cellars in which they stored their produce and so forth, and it was also called a storm shelter. Sure. Caves is what they were. And I wonder how many are left around in the area now standing as storm shelter cellars. They certainly don't need it for to hold their produce or anything like that, but that was a big thing on the farm back in the 30s.
Oh yeah,
and before.
Yeah, huge. You needed that, and when the twister was coming, that was the place to go. It was below ground, and we still tell people, get below ground, get to your basement. That makes a huge difference. We're fortunate here in the Midwest, I won't even say the Midwest. I'll say here in Illinois, especially central Illinois, where we have soil that we can dig a basement. Some areas of the country, it's not an option.
Right.
Yes.
Oklahoma, for example, and parts of Kansas and Texas, and then when you get farther south, to Alabama and Mississippi, they're too close to the Gulf, and their water table
is so high
that you can't dig a basement. You'd have water in it all the time. But here we are fortunate that we can do that, and so we can take shelter, and that really is the best place to survive a tornado if it were coming right into your area. But yeah, there's not a lot of those shelters around anymore. Although I'll tell you, there is over the last 20 years or so, there's a new industry that has really blossomed, and and we've worked closely with them as well. It's a storm shelter industry where they have a number of different varieties. They have somewhere they'll do just like the old root cellar. They'll dig a hole in your yard and put this
Quonset hut there.
Well, they'll put it underground. And then there's a door that opens up, and you just walk down there and go into the shelter. If you don't want to dig into your property, or you can't, they will put a shelter either in your home or in your garage, above ground shelter or outside. I saw one recently someone had put in outside. Looks like a shed. To me, it looked like a storage shed, and you open it up, and it's a concrete and steel shelter with vents in it and everything, so you get fresh air in there, and you could fit 15 to 20 people in there.
Oh my!
And it's supposed to withstand, because it's bolted to the ground, it's supposed to withstand the strongest tornado. And the way they're engineered, the way they're constructed, I believe it, because you know, that type of construction can withstand the very high wind and debris hitting it. And it's made a difference. It really has. It's something that if somebody wants to look into it, it's definitely something to research. They can be as small as a walk-in closet in your home. And I've seen pictures of homes that were completely destroyed, and this storm shelter closet
is standing,
and there's a family inside there. So. And they're not that expensive. That's what really surprised me. I thought, okay, you're talking new construction. This is going to cost me, $10,000 or $20,000 to put in my new home. You can get a modest size shelter for less than $1,000, $2,000.
Really?
It's incredible. And the big ones for, say, like a small business where maybe you need to put 15, 20, 30 people, and they even have them for more people, you're talking about $3,000. So these things, when you look at a human life, it's really not that expensive.
You may never need it, but if you did, boy, you'd be darn glad.
And that's kind of a counterpart to the lightning rods we put up,
Absolutely,
that's an investment.
Yeah. Well, and as you mentioned, you may never need it, but here's another thing too: is they turn these into Well, you may need it the one time, and if let's say you never use it. What they're doing is they're developing these into functional space. So it's a closet, it's a workshop, it's a shed that you can put stuff in.
You could store our wine there.
Yeah. Nice wine cellar.
I'd have to get a big one. Maybe you should give a little tutorial on tornado preparedness, since it is that month. And you mentioned that we're lucky that we can dig basements here, but some people don't have a basement. And I've heard two things that are directly in conflict. One is that it's good for you then to go to your bathtub, that would be a safe place. And the other is, you mustn't ever do that because the storm will follow the water pipes.
Okay.
Now there's an old wives' tale.
Yeah, that really is.
I think.
Yeah.
Or the river it'll follow. I've heard that too.
We have seen where some of the really small tornadoes, the ones that don't last very long, that don't have much strength, they will follow rivers and creeks and things like that. It's interesting how they do that. Now the big tornadoes, the ones that are going to do a lot of damage to your home. I mean, even the ones that could, just if the worst thing it does, it's still bad, but if it tore the roof off your home, the rest of your home was standing, those tornadoes, it doesn't matter what's in their way. They're going to go across rivers, they're going to go through woods and whatever. But when you talk about the bathroom, taking shelter in the bathtub, there's some very good reasoning behind that. A lot of homes, now I know like some of the older homes don't follow this, but a lot of homes in a bathroom on the lowest level of the home, not on a second story, but you got to get down to the first floor, they don't have windows. When a tornado comes through, all strengths of tornadoes, usually the first thing that happens is the windows break.
Yeah.
And then stuff flies into the house. And that's what causes damage inside the house, breaking walls down and things. If you don't have a window in the room, a lot of times we've seen where that small room will stay intact. The other thing is when you think about how a home is constructed, bathroom walls, at least I don't know if they're doing this with the newer construction, but I know back in the day, bathroom walls were built with 2x6s instead of 2x4s to accommodate pipes.
Yes.
So bathroom walls are just a little bit thicker, and you've got the what they call the green board, so the stuff that shouldn't mold because of showers and bathtubs, which is sometimes a little bit thicker and a little bit more sturdy than the regular drywall. So a bathroom is a little more secure engineering-wise. So that's some of the reason behind that. It's because of the no window and it's a little bit thicker walls. So we have seen that. Closets too. We tell people too, if you like, some homes there's a window in the bathroom.
Yeah,
not the best place to be.
We've got that in our older homes.
Yeah,
windows
and my
in the
house
bathroom.
too. So if you don't have a basement, then close all the doors to the rooms, the bathroom, and being in a hallway, being in a closet in that hallway is better. You want to put as many walls between you and the outside as possible if a tornado is approaching. That really, and I've seen evidence of that in many cases right here in central Illinois, where trees have come down on homes and the narrow hallway walls have stopped that tree from falling any farther.
Really?
Yeah. Or if a tornado has taken apart most of the home, it's left a hallway, a closet,
intact,
a bathroom
or
intact.
semi-intact anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Where somebody at least could stay a little safer.
That's the thing about tornadoes, though, is they're so unpredictable in that the weirdest phenomena can take place.
Oh, I know.
They're just amazing.
Oh, they really are. And I've seen some very amazing, interesting things through the years looking at damage after a tornado has come through. That's another thing that we do. Whenever a tornado comes through, we go out and we assess the damage. How strong was the tornado? And that's one thing that, as meteorologists, because of the danger and because of the high winds and tornadoes, we still don't completely understand what is all going on within that tornado. The wind and are there other forces going on that's causing some of these strange things, like your straw being stuck into the side of a tree. Yeah. I've seen metal driven into metal.
Yeah. Bizarre.
You couldn't create a machine strong enough to do that, short of actually welding it. And I've seen that happen. I've seen styrofoam pieces get embedded into metal beams.
Yeah,
that's hard to get.
You can't wrap your mind around. No, you can't.
No,
you just can't wrap your mind around that. So there's something else going on. All kinds of lifting and moving and other forces changing, and we know there's pressure changes and things like that occurring. So it's just amazing. And yeah, when you talk about how unpredictable they are, it's from our standpoint, it's predictable from the standpoint of we can pick out an area. We can say, okay, central Illinois is under the gun for tornadoes today, or this area, this group of 15, 20 counties is under the gun for tornadoes today. But until that storm develops, we still have a hard time picking out, okay, here's the storm now, minutes before that tornado hits, as opposed to days like we can do with winter storms.
Chris, many people drive by on Route 10 and see that nice little facility. It looks very nice, too, from the road. They don't realize that people are out there 24/7 in the wee small hours of the morning tracking weather and so forth. The other thing that we don't realize is the economic impact in our community to have that facility there. You have a very significant payroll. You have people who do go from other towns to come in here to work. We don't have all the meteorologists in town right here in Logan County, but it's a major impact economically in the community. Would you like to address that just a minute?
Yeah, it sure has. And when we were looking for an area 22, 23 years ago, where are we going to put the new weather office for central Illinois, there were lots of bidders. Peoria, Springfield, Decatur were saying, hey, put it here, put it here. The university in Champaign, they wanted it there. We worked closely with the folks here in Logan County to put it here, and it has had an impact. We do have staff members that live here in town, as you mentioned, but also we have groups come to our office. I just had one last week. A group came up from Springfield for a tour. And you think, well, how does that add to our economy? Well, they did the tour, and then they all went out to eat afterwards.
Exactly.
And there's times that we have conferences, workshops, and things at our office. So we have people staying in the hotels and the restaurants and things like that around town. So that has had an impact. And but also we like to think too, not so much. I mean, us contributing to it, but us hopefully, getting the weather information out there to people using that weather information to make an impact. For example, it could be as little as, hey, I want to have a picnic this afternoon, personal. Oh, I see there's, huge chance for rain. Maybe I should cancel my plans or would change something. Every year with the Logan County Fair. Okay, you got people coming in for the fair from all over the county, but other areas too. I see sometimes they look at the list of the fair winners and they're from surrounding counties. You got people coming into the area, spending their money, going to the fair. You want to keep those people safe. And so we work closely with the Emergency Management Agency to provide them information so they can make decisions on, we got the Fair Queen pageant tonight. Are we going to have that outside the grandstand, or do we need to move it indoors? Because we don't want anyone to get struck by lightning, or have a high wind come through suddenly. I think about what happened in Indiana at their state fair a few years ago.
Yes.
We're trying to avoid that and make sure the people that make the decisions have that information.
Can you just address for just a little, I think we're going to run over, Jim. I hope that doesn't ruin your apple cart. Anyway, this scale, on television they say that there was a tornado here and it was an F2 or an F4. What denotes F2 or F4 or whatever?
It's the amount of damage that the tornado has produced. The wind with it is really an estimate. We have worked with engineers, structural engineers, to determine how much wind does it take to break apart a building or knock down a tree or that type of thing. But it's a description of the damage. It's a scale that was developed more than 40 years ago by a professor out of Chicago, Dr. Ted Fujita.
That's why it's
called an F.
You knew him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fascinating guy. Groundbreaking research. And at any rate, he developed this scale, and it was enhanced about 10 years ago. So now we call it EF, Enhanced Fujita Scale, 0 through 5. 0 being very minimal damage. If a tornado affected your home at EF0, it might tear the gutters off, a couple shingles, that type of thing. Your home will be intact. All the way up to an EF5, which is extremely rare. We maybe get one of those a year in the United States somewhere, and that's complete, utter destruction, and nothing is left. It's not even, no debris even. Everything is just carried away. Washington was an EF4 because that was complete destruction, but the debris was nearby. It's just to describe the strength of the tornado.
I took a semester of meteorology so I wouldn't have to take chemistry.
Good choice.
All I can remember is the Beaufort scale, and I can't tell you about that now, except that I know it had to do with the wind.
You know the word.
Yes, one quick question before we run out of time. As our weather stations in the country, Homeland Security, have they had any impact on our weather stations as to what you're supposed to do?
Yes, absolutely. I tell you, our whole country changed after 9/11, and so did we. Not only from the standpoint of the physical security of our building, of our structure, since we're a federal agency, but also what we can provide as an agency to emergency managers, and also to, say, the Department of Homeland Security. We have a really close relationship with FEMA. And other government agencies that are involved with security. If there were to be some sort of disaster that would fall under that, we would provide weather support for that disaster, because if you're looking at, say, a bomb going off, where is that plume of bad stuff going to go? And we have models, computer programs that can determine what areas should be evacuated or that type of thing. So, yeah, we work very closely with them on that.
Our guest this morning has been Chris Miller, our local radio weather service. You know, Judith, Chris is the John Fulton of weather.
He is. He's my hero.
He's to weather what John Fulton is to ag here in the
I take that as a compliment.
Well,
thank you.
And I meant that as a compliment too, sir. I had a Mark Twain comment that I dug up, but I found another one that I really like, and maybe it has to do with politics too while we're at it. The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The realist adjusts to sails. Maybe we ought to think about that in our political.
There you go.
Chris, thank you very, very much, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.